Alright, so this is going to be the second video on my YouTube channel. Based on the first video, I got some feedback to increase the webcam size, so that's there, and then also my code editor should be more zoomed in. So that's going to be two improvements for this video. And this video is going to be about creating a dynamic form in NextJS and React, or using React. So before we actually hop in, I have like a bit of an agenda that we can go through. So first we're just going to introduce the problem and actually what we're trying to achieve. And then model the components that we need to get this dynamic form and kind of pay attention to what are the technical things that we need to think about before we actually start coding. So for example, how a dynamic form kind of leads to like a tree structure, what are the pros and the cons, how to pass data to like the children within that tree structure. You saw from the last video that I really want everything to be type safe. So how can we make sure that the data matches the backend schemas? How can we keep things type safe? And also how to reset the form if like user changes questions before in the form. And then I'm just going to show my old approach, so how I solved the problem, and kind of highlight what I want to improve in the video. And then I already improved it, so show the improved version. And then basically a discussion, because there's still a lot of things that I think could be done better. And that's kind of where I hope some people in the comments can just let me know what they think could be improved on. So yeah, let's just hop into the problem. So again, using the Studently website, there's this questionnaire basically, and based on the answer of questions, we want to dynamically change the next question. So for example, are you a full-time student? And the next question becomes, are you from the Netherlands? But if they answer no, then there's, for example, the end of the questionnaire, like, okay, you don't qualify for basically these benefits. And this just goes on, like here we see results, but if you're not from the Netherlands, then the questionnaire continues differently. So that's what it looks like on the actual website. This is kind of what we're trying to build. And this is how I guess I would model it first. So the user types in an age, and as long as the age is less than 33, they kind of enter the questionnaire. So you can see that here. If they type 33, then the questionnaire ends, but if they're below, then they're back to this questionnaire. And then this is that tree structure that I kind of said would start happening if you have this questionnaire with different nodes. So basically a student node, and if they're not a student, then questionnaire ends. But if they are a student, you continue down a different path and so on until you get to basically different outcomes of the questionnaire. And some of the things we have to pay attention to is, for example, nodes or questions deep in the tree might need information from above the tree. So for example, in the requirements node, I can show this requirement, working at least 32 hours a month, depends on the age of the user. So this question needs to have access to this question. So I've highlighted that in red. That's something we have to think about. How are we going to pass data through this structure? So basically this tree structure, how to pass data. So how can we also ensure that each of these questions corresponds to a backend? Like this is a profile object, for example. How do we make sure that it corresponds correctly to something we're storing in the database, like is a student, is Dutch, and so on. And then another technical thing we have to pay attention to is like if someone is very far in the questionnaire and then they change a question all the way back in the beginning, how do we make sure it resets completely? Because now they're on a different path on the tree. So that's kind of what we're going to build today. Look at my old approach and then see what I improved on. All right, so let's dive into some code now and actually see how the current implementation works, and basically what we need to improve on, or what we're going to try to improve on. So the current setup is inside this questionnaire section component. I have this form tag that first asks the user for the age, so nothing complicated here, just an input with a label. And then ignore this for now, but it works by first creating this root node. And the root node is the question where it asks if you're a student. So how the implementation works now is each node is defined first. So we have a root node, a Dutch nationality node, a living away from home node, for example. And they all return this question node component, which is here. And then the two most important props. So basically, the two most important things that you can pass to this component are the follow-up on yes and the follow-up on no. So you can see here in the root node, the follow-up on yes is just another component, which is the Dutch nationality node, which you can see here, Dutch nationality node. And the follow-up on no is a leaf node, which is just the way I say basically we've reached a leaf. So either end the questionnaire or see results. And then in the actual question node component, I check the value. So is the value of this input yes? If it is, then put follow up on yes. If it's no, then put follow up on no. So yeah, that kind of creates this tree structure. And then within this actual question node contains all the logic to actually update the user. And so we're going to take a look at that. So hopefully you guys understand how the follow up on yes and follow up no, how the dynamic part works. So now let's actually look at how we're keeping track of what the user enters and how we actually pass that to the database at the backend. So in the page that renders this route, so this /questionnaire route, we first get a profile or user. I've called it profile here. We first get a profile from the backend. So we make a request to the backend, get a profile. The profile has a certain type, so we know it has a name, an email, is a student, for example. And we pass that profile as a prop to the questionnaire section. So now the questionnaire section has access to that profile. Then this kind of needs to be refactored. I'm a bit lazy here. So this is one of the things that we can improve, but we use a state variable called a user, but it's basically just a profile. I just couldn't name two things profile, otherwise the program would crash. It's a state variable that keeps track of the profile. So now user has the same properties as the profile, but if the backend returned a user that already existed, then we have those values already. So they will be auto-filled. So that's why when you refresh the page, it's getting from the backend, I already exist, and it's filling them out. So yeah, that's how we get the user. And then we create this context. So this is from the use context hook that is provided by React. And this is especially used when you have components deep in the tree that need to access data that are only in the parent. So in this case, the parent is the form. And because we have this root node component that kind of recursively creates more child components, use context is the perfect thing to use because we don't have to keep passing data through props. We can just create this context, which is basically the user that we received from the backend, and a function, this set user, which allows all the components in the all the child components to update the user. And then the way you pass that to child components is you wrap any of the components with a user context component. So now all of the child components here will have access to these things, the user and the update user function. So you can see that through here in the actual question node. These are the child components. We use the context to get these two objects, the user and the update user. So now we can look at how this actually works. This is something that I still haven't really figured out a better way to do it yet, but I'm using ShadCN's radio group item. And for that, the value of it has to be a string. So it's a bit awkward because I give the values yes and no. But then I have to do some kind of conversion because the backend stores booleans, true and false. So when I'm actually saving values, so let's say when the user changes between yes or no, so this function, handle select change, is called whenever the user changes the input. And this is the awkward part. I have to check, okay, is the value yes? If it's yes, then store true. And if it's not yes, then store false. Ideally, I would like to skip this and just be the value true and false. So yeah, let me know if any of you guys know a proper element for HTML that can do this better than a radio group item. So that's something to be improved on. And so that's how the handle select change function works. And it also it also handles the situation where if we go deep into the questionnaire, and then we go back, the questionnaire completely resets. And the way that's done is through this for loop. So each question has a property key, and if we find that key, we basically delete all the elements in that object that were after it. So the only thing that will be left is the question before, so for example here, and the question itself. So that's how that part works. So that handles like going back from the questionnaire and resetting it. So yeah, that's kind of the internals of this component. And now the things that I want to change in the new thing, in the updated version, is first I want to put all of these components into their own file, because they don't belong in the questionnaire section. It would just be nicer if they were in their own file. And I also want to get rid of this tree structure. I would rather just have all the components be a direct child of the form. And that will also make it easier to pass data from parent to child components, and maybe avoid using the use context altogether. So that's what we're going to look at in the next part. How can we refactor this code to have that implementation? All right, so let's switch branch, because I've already created this. I've already made the changes. So this is kind of how it looks now. So instead of having this root component, we have now a bunch of components called the conditional question component. And what the conditional question component does is it takes a condition. So is the user a student? Is the user Dutch? Are they living at home? And it gives a true component and a false component. So this is the implementation. So if the condition is null or the condition is undefined, so that basically means the backend returns an object, and we just don't know whether it's true or false, then we return nothing. Otherwise, all of these questions would start showing with nothing filled in, because in JavaScript, null and undefined it would return the false component always. So we first check does it exist. If it doesn't exist, then we just return nothing, no HTML. But if the condition does exist and it's true, then return the true component. And if it does exist and it's false, then return the false component. And so now everything here is a direct child of the form, because here you have a form and now you have this input with label component. And then these conditional questions are not nested deep. They're all direct children of the form. And if you now go through the questionnaire, let me move this face again, you will see that it's all just children of the form. So this is a lot easier for someone who's debugging this to see what's going on, because there's way more of a structure. By the way, I could probably simplify these CSS classes for sure. So maybe that's in the next video. So let's go back here and move my face. And also, this question nodes is now in its own component. So basically, we have this object question nodes, which contains a bunch of functions, and these functions are just components. So they return question nodes. And I've also added some type safety. So for example, the question node now, the property key has to be a key of the profile. So the profile is what the backend needs. And the property key now has to be one of the keys. So name, email, age. So if I, for example, come into the key here and I change is student to is students, we're going to have an error here because the property key needs to be one of these values. So now I can immediately find errors. So that's nice. I've also removed the two props from the previous section, the ones that were follow up on yes and follow up on no, because now that's kind of handled directly here. So those things we've changed, and the discussion, hopefully some people in the comments can help me find better solutions, is this is still quite repetitive. So I still have to define these conditional questions. somehow I'd probably rather have a map, which I can just map to the entries, and have one line of code here that goes through this question notes somehow and prints the components. I think it's possible. I haven't found a good solution for that. Another thing, I would really like to simplify this question node component, because for the same thing I explained, these values, I have to convert them between yes and true and no and false. So that's not ideal. And those are kind of the main things that I'm looking to improve. And I hope this video made sense. I hope you now have an idea of how you can build a dynamic form in React. It's basically, you need a condition, and if the condition is yes, you need to print a component, and if the condition is no, you need to print another component that you would like. And it just depends on how you want to do that implementation. I've shown the more tree structure, and this is the more flat structure, and they both have their pros and cons. So yeah, let me know what you guys think, and what you guys think about the website in general, I guess. Thanks for watching.